Hello, my friend. This is Arianna Pinner. It is so lovely to be with you today. I just got off a clarity call with a customer, and she and I were speaking about this feeling of being exhausted, even though she's getting a really good quality night's sleep. And we were talking about the real reason that she feels exhausted, and it isn't about lack of sleep. You see, most people think that exhaustion comes from not getting a good night's sleep or sleeping too little or something to do with your bedtime routine. And while sleep is essential, there's something deeper at play when you are experiencing exhaustion after having a good night's rest. And that thing that's at play is when you push through when your body is asking you to pause. Now, we live in a world that glorifies the hustle and also glorifies immediacy. The internet has completely changed the way we work and live. We send an email, it doesn't take weeks or months to get there as it used to with postal mail. An email reaches someone's inbox within 5 minutes, if that. And there is this expectation, this unexplained expectation that we need to respond the moment we receive the email. And that is a whole other story. It's a whole other podcast because I don't believe in making sure that you respond the moment that you receive something. I believe in the power of the pause. Anyway, that's a story for another day. So we live in this world that glorifies this immediacy, and in that, the hustle, and in that, we ignore our natural rhythms in favor of constant output. But your body is not a machine. It follows cycles. These cycles are of energy and of rest and of expansion and constriction and contraction. And then there's also action. And then the other side of that is reflection. So when you override these natural rhythms, exhaustion isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Let's get into the idea of natural rhythms. So before we go any further, let's clarify what natural rhythms are and what they're not. They are natural cycles and patterns that govern life, both internally and externally. They shape everything from the changing seasons to your energy levels throughout the day. You already experience them whether you're aware of them or not. And they come in the forms of circadian rhythms, ultradian rhythms, the menstrual cycle for those who menstruate, and the seasonal cycle. To begin with, the circadian rhythm dictates when you feel awake and when you need rest. The ultradian rhythm influences your focus, signaling when to take breaks. The menstrual cycle, for those who menstruate, shifts energy levels and emotions throughout the month, a 28-day cycle. And the seasonal cycle affects your mood, motivation, and even your productivity. And when you work with these rhythms alone, just these 4 rhythms, instead of against them, your life actually becomes easier because you stop forcing yourself into productivity when your body needs to rest. And as a result, you experience more sustainable energy and creativity. Now, it's not to say that every single menstruating body has the same experience days 1 to 7 of a cycle, days 7 to 14 of a cycle, etc. It's more about you finding your own rhythm. In the same way that a lot of people might be energized by winter and feel really relaxed in the sun, or vice versa, be energized during summer months and want to hibernate and rest during winter. We can use these rhythms, these natural cycles and rhythms, to inform us of nature's way of showing up, but we can also find our own natural rhythm within nature's cycles. Now, the number one question that I always get when we have these conversations in my coaching calls is, how do you find your own natural rhythm? And the first thing that I'm always going to suggest is a self-awareness practice, which starts with stillness. Yeah. Okay. So we go back to this idea that we live in a world that glorifies speed, it rewards speed. And stillness in this world can feel like a radical act. We fill the quiet with distractions, whether it be scrolling or planning or doing, because stillness in itself asks us to listen, to notice, to feel. And a lot of the times, we may feel really uncomfortable with listening, with noticing, and with feeling. And so we pile on distractions that take us away from getting really intimate with our emotions, with our surroundings, and with listening to what is going on in our environment. A really beautiful way for you to notice whether this is something that you struggle with is when you are sitting in a conversation with someone, are you more likely to respond to that person without necessarily having heard what they say, constantly trying to bring in your own flair, your own stories, your own opinions? Or when you sit in conversation with someone, is that conversation about the other? Do you want to get to know them? Are you listening to what they're saying? Are you allowing them the freedom and the space to communicate to and with you without you stepping in to try and fill in their blanks or finish their sentences? Because this is a really good indicator of how comfortable you are with stillness, how comfortable you are with observations and observing things that are happening in your life. Because the thing is that without stillness, without this ability to hold space, this is basically what we're doing when we're being still, self-awareness is not possible. I want you to think of a body of water. When it's turbulent, the surface distorts everything. But when it's still, it reflects clearly. It reflects clearly. The same is true for your mind. When life is constant motion, it's hard to see yourself clearly. You react instead of respond. You push instead of pause. And you move through the world without really noticing how you feel. And this is the power of the pause. Because stillness isn't just the absence of movement. It's a deep presence with yourself. It's allowing space for the quiet truths beneath the surface to rise. And in that space, self-awareness grows. You notice the tension in your body and you ask yourself, what am I holding on to? You hear the thoughts running through your mind and you ask yourself, is this belief really mine? You feel the weight of an unspoken emotion and you ask, what here needs to be acknowledged? So stillness then becomes a practice. And finding stillness doesn't necessarily mean that you withdraw from life. In fact, it actually means the opposite. It means creating moments where you can meet yourself fully so that you can engage with life to the fullest. So, when you sit in stillness, it might, because it's a practice, it might feel uncomfortable at first. You might want to breathe with awareness. You might want to notice the rhythm of your breath and let it anchor you in the present moment. You might want to go deep and just sit in stillness for a few minutes with no music, no headphones in, no guided meditation, just you. And then observe instead of reacting. So when something stirs discomfort, you can pause and you can breathe and you can ask the question, what's really happening? One of the things that I learned on my yoga mat was that quite often when we're in a pose, there is a 5-breath hold. This is if you're practicing a certain style of yoga called hatha, especially the ones that I teach. I like to hold with at least 5 breaths. And it's during those 5 breaths that there's this activity in the mind, and it can show up as getting an itch. Let's say you're in a pose where your arms are stretched out long, and all of a sudden you feel an itch on your shoulder. And then there's this anxiety about needing to scratch the itch. But what if you didn't scratch the itch? What if you just observed the itch? It's uncomfortable at first because we're so used to scratching the itch. But what if you just allowed the itch to be there? What if you focused so much in on the itch that it dissolved? And this is the power of the mind, the power of stillness, the power of observing things that are going on around us. Instead of reacting to the body's impulse and scratching the itch, that's reacting, we can respond to the itch and ask what's really coming up in that moment. Because yes, it could just be an itch. Yeah, there could be a bead of sweat that's dripping down your shoulder and it's tickling your arm and it's asking for you to get rid of it. Or it could be your mind playing tricks on you, telling you to come out of that pose to scratch something that actually isn't that itchy, but you're feeling uncomfortable in the pose. Maybe it's a long hold. Maybe you're not used to holding something for that length of time. So then to bring this into a setting where you are off the mat, you could then move slowly and deliberately. So just the same way as we move really slowly on our mat, there's no quick or sudden movements. We do this off the mat as well. So whether you're drinking tea or you're walking from one venue to the next, let that be an act of presence. Instead of reaching for your phone and scrolling when you're waiting in line to pay for your groceries, what if you allowed both feet to settle into the ground beneath you? What if you drew your lower belly in as you breathe out, and you allow the belly to expand as you breathe in through the nose, all the while observing what's going on around you and holding space for whatever it is that you observe without needing to cut that short? The more you cultivate stillness, the more clearly you see yourself. And with that clarity comes choice, my friends. This is where we're going with this, because you have a choice in every single moment of your life. The choice to live, the choice to speak and what to speak, and then the choice to act from a deep place of truth. And self-awareness isn't found in the noise. It's uncovered in the stillness you allow yourself to embrace. And so if the first step is awareness, you can notice your body and when it feels naturally energized versus when it craves stillness. And if we bring it back to if we bring it back to the question, how do we find our natural rhythm? It begins with the practice of self-awareness. Some questions that you can explore is, what do I feel when I feel creative? So you're peeling it back. So if your job it requires an element of creativity, you want to know, what is it that you feel just before you're at your most creative state? What is the trigger? What helps you move into creative states? For me, it's movement and breath work. So I know that if ever I'm feeling stuck or stagnant, one of my strategies is to move my body and then to sit in a place of complete expansion before I do any creative work. So figure out what is it that triggers your creativity? And then to bring it back to the question, what is your natural rhythm? The question you can ask is, when do I feel most creative and productive throughout the day? Another question on the flip side of that is, when do I feel sluggish, distracted, or drained? Another question is, do my energy levels follow a weekly or monthly pattern? What happens when I push through exhaustion instead of pausing? And I want to share a little bit about what my exploration has been when I'm working through these questions, or when I have worked through these questions, in the hope that that inspires you to do the same sort of inquiry. So for me, when do I feel most creative and productive throughout the day? I'm a natural early riser. I wake up anything between 4 and 5 naturally, no alarm clock. And I feel at my most energized in the morning, my most creative, my most productive in the morning. So I will get up out of bed, I will move my body, and then I will do my creative work. My creative work looks like content creation, or coming up with a strategy for a client, or supporting someone through a difficult transition. It requires of me to tap into my intuition and then become creative with and for them, so that we can create beautiful solutions. So this is where I feel the most creative and the most productive in my day. I know that when I get to about 9 or 10 in the morning, I love to go back into the studio. If I'm doing a strength training workout or a high intensity cardio workout, between 10 and 11 is my time, because I know that my body is at its peak performance at around 10 to 11. So I'll mostly go into the studio and make that me time. And then the next question that I asked was, when do I feel sluggish and distracted or drained? That's round about my 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Depends on what I've got going on. So I know between those times, I try, on the days that I'm not seeing clients, I try to take myself offline completely, and I'll do a yoga nidra, or I'll have a nap, or I'll lie down and read a book. This is where I feel sluggish and distracted and drained, and I don't really want to infuse any of my work with this energy. But I also want to allow myself the opportunity to recharge before the evening sets in. I've also asked my question, do my energy levels follow a weekly or a monthly pattern? This is a really interesting question, because a lot of the work that I've done with menstrual cycles and with looking at moon cycles will often tell you that there's a certain spike in energy during certain phases of your cycle, whether that be the moon cycle or your menstrual cycle, and that there'll be dips of energy. But if I'm honest with myself and I sit in stillness every single morning before I go about doing whatever it is that I'm doing of the day, I've actually noticed that my energy levels don't follow a monthly pattern. They don't follow a weekly pattern. And so for me, the most important thing for me to do every single morning is to come into stillness, to ask my body what it's feeling, to discern whether or not it's in a high energy phase or in a low energy phase, and then go about my day according to what it is that I've observed in that morning. I know that it's been really helpful for a lot of my clients to use their menstrual cycle as a bit of a diary, or a schedule for how they show up. And at first, this really did help me. This was maybe 10 years ago, but I've since evolved from that, and working with my day-to-day energy cycles and being an observer of how my energy feels in the morning has been much more supportive for me. But of course, if that is something that you're working with, then really feel into that and feel into whether or not the prescription or description of what monthly cycles looks like in the natural world or in a female menstruating body. Be really curious about whether or not that's something that is true for you. And then the final question is, what happens when I push through exhaustion instead of pausing? And for me, this is migraine territory. So last year, I had a year where I was not well at all. And my body was fighting low levels of inflammation, and I didn't know that it was happening until maybe March or April in the year. And then I was working with 2 specialists to help me reduce that inflammation. And I had multiple operations, and I was in surgery to help with these specific issues. And throughout that time, I found that if I did not rest when my body was tired, I would get a migraine. And this is just such a beautiful, although at the time really frustrating, but a beautiful way of explaining to you how your body speaks really loudly. And I want you to take a moment and think about what happens to you when you push through exhaustion instead of pausing. All right, let's switch gears here for a moment. With all of that information, once you've paused and you've answered those questions for yourself, I want you to track your energy patterns for a few weeks. And this can reveal your unique rhythm. It can help you align your schedule with your natural highs and lows. So, you, like me, could be someone who has a natural daily rhythm as opposed to it being a monthly or a weekly cycle. And so, you can stick with your daily rhythm. And of course, there are going to be some days that just don't feel like that, and that's fine too. But start to figure out what is your unique rhythm, what feels most natural for you. And then you can then either decide you want to relate that to nature's rhythms where they rest, expand, and contract, or you want to create your own unique rhythm that is all about how you are feeling. Now, I just want to make a little bit of a note here because this is a mindset shift. It's a belief shift that you are creating if you choose to step into your own natural rhythm. You are then choosing to do something other than cultural norms, societal pressures, perhaps even circles that you live and vibe in, like women's circles or moon circles or natural rhythm cycles that you may be a part of, is culturally or familiarly. I just want to give you permission to step into your own natural rhythm rather than feeling like you need to oblige that what's happening around you. So nature in itself doesn't operate at full speed all the time. Everything in nature has its own unique cycle. The moon waxes and wanes, expanding in brightness before retreating into darkness, and that has its own cycle. The ocean has tides, rising and falling in a constant state of movement and rest, and she has her own cycle. And of course, the moon and the ocean, they interrelate and intertwine and they affect one another, but their cycles are different and the same. Trees grow leaves in spring, flourish in summer, shed in autumn before going inward for winter. And of course, the sun has its own cycle as well. And in that, it has a seasonal cycle and a daily cycle. And so I just want you to expand your mind and remember that you are nature and nature exists within you. And there are imprints of the natural world in your body, and that you get to choose whether or not you want to step in your natural rhythm and then come up with a strategy on how you can make that work for you in whatever circumstance you find yourself in. Because nature never rushes, yet it gets everything done. And in the same way, you too can be that. As an example, when I worked in corporate, I remember feeling drained at about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And what I used to do was instead of taking a full lunch break, I would have lunch and then I would reserve 15 minutes and then take that 15 minutes at a certain time because back then everything was clocked. Can you believe it? Anyway, and I would then meditate. Now, when I had an office of my own, I would close the door and sit up against the door and I would meditate up against the door, close my eyes and just breathe for 15 minutes. When I worked in spaces where there were warehouses and spaces where we could relax and rejuvenate, I would book out a space and just go up there and close my eyes for 15 minutes. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be this grand gesture where you make everyone aware that this is what you're going to do. You can literally escape for 15 minutes and close your eyes and rejuvenate and come to a place where you find inner alignment and you allow your body to take micro rests rather than it needing to have to be a big Metro Golden Mayer production, right? So, how do you know when to take rest versus when to take action? And I just mentioned a little bit before about seasons, but I want you to think about your energy like the seasons. So, spring is emerging energy. Your spring, when it comes to taking action, is when you feel like you have ideas brewing, your motivation is rising. And this is time for gentle movement forward. So, after my operation in October, I took November to heal. I had most of November off, and about midway through December, if not to the end of December, I started to feel my spring come back. I was emerging with new energy. Now, summer is peak energy, right? Your creativity and focus are at their highest, and now is the time to take action and then you bring things to life. So, for example, here, me being in front of a camera, recording podcasts and videos for you, I'm in my summer energy. And of course, I'm just using this language for you to get accustomed to what this energy feels like. But of course, like I said before, you could feel like your winter energy is when you emerge. Yeah. And so then you could just literally flip these seasons around. But let's just use this language just to have a verbiage to speak to the energy that comes with seasons. Then we have autumn, which is winding down, where your energy starts to decline. This is a time to refine, release, to prepare to slow down. I feel like this part is quite often skipped out when we are in project mode. We push our summer energy as much as we can, and then we fall in a heap. And there's no autumn, there's no winding down. And this is quite often the phase that gets left out of seasonal work because we don't really like the idea of refining and releasing and preparing to slow down. And I learned such a beautiful lesson last year when I was going through this health issue was that, I realized in August that I was going to go in for an operation in October. And I remember coming home from my specialist appointment and saying to my husband, you know what? I think what I'm going to do is take the month of September to refine, release, and slow down. So I didn't just cut and stop, which is what I usually do and what I have been doing for many, many years. Last year, I took the time to have conversations with contractors that were working with me, people who were in my team, clients, students, and to tell them that, I'm going to go in for an operation. I'm going to be slowing down completely. I'm taking the rest of the year off. So let's finish up what we're doing now. Let's complete the project that we're doing now. Let's close off the month together. And then I'll reconvene with you in February next year. And then, of course, that leaves space for winter, the state of deep rest, because when you are retreating and reflecting and replenishing, if you've taken the time to slow down, to regulate your nervous system such that you have the space to retreat, then instead of resisting with constant thoughts and ideas of what you haven't done and what's still left to do, because you've taken the time to shut everything down gradually, you have the opportunity to embrace this time of restoration and rest. Now, with all of that being said, I want to remind you that it's really important that regardless of what it is that you choose to do, whether it's find your peak in summer or find your peak in winter, that you follow some sort of natural rhythm. You could have your rhythm set over the course of a week. Maybe you find your autumn is on a Friday and your winter is on a Saturday, Sunday, and your Monday is kind of your springtime where you're emerging, and you've got your Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday where you're in your summer. That's just an example of how you can plan out your seasons based on your own natural energetic rhythm, your natural energy cycles. For me, as I explained, I have this every day. I have a daily cycle. Of course, I also have a monthly cycle, and I also have a seasonal cycle. I feel the seasons. I'm in touch with my environment around me. But naturally, I feel my summer peak at around 10 a.m. in the mornings, and then I start to slowly retreat. I wind down after 11, 12, 1. I have an autumn period round about 2, 3, 4, and then I start to wind down my day. And then, of course, in the morning, I wake up and I'm in my spring. I'm starting to emerge. These are just examples of how you can plan out your natural rhythms and your cycles. If you don't, do this, and you are struggling with exhaustion, if you don't heed to the callings of your body and your natural rhythms and cycles, chances are you will lead to exhaustion or chronic fatigue at some stage, because your body whispers before it shouts. Fatigue, brain fog, irritability, restlessness, all of these are signs that it's time to slow down. Inspiration, excitement, clarity, those are signals that it's time to step forward. So what does it mean to actually work with your energy? This is what I mean. Working with your energy means listening to your body's signals and adapting your actions accordingly. So first, you're going to track your energy patterns. You're going to notice when you feel naturally alert, and then conversely, when you struggle to focus. Number 2 is you will structure your day accordingly. Do deep work during high energy periods and take breaks when your focus dips. Number 3 is you will honor rest without guilt. Say it with me. I will honor rest without guilt, because rest is not a reward for hard work. I'm going to say that again for the people at the back. Rest isn't a reward for hard work. Instead, it's the foundation for sustainable productivity. Number 4, you will align with bigger cycles, whether it's the seasons, the moon phases, your menstrual cycle. I want you to notice how they influence your energy. This project could take you a full year to figure out for yourself, but just do it with this curious, exciting, or excited energy that has you moving towards something that's so much bigger than you and so much more exciting than what you're in right now. And I want you to release the need to push, because productivity isn't about force, it's about timing. So knowing when to lean in and when to step back is really important for you. My friend, this is the concept and the essence of what I call stepping into flow over force, moving in alignment with your own nature instead of against it. If you want a deeper framework to apply this to your life, you can download the Flow Over Force guide and start creating more ease today. It's completely free. You can download it via the link in either the caption or the description below. And you will notice how these small shifts that you bring into your life, which are a part of the Flow Over Force guide, they change everything. So instead of asking, how can I push through? You could ask, what if I worked with my energy instead of against it? That simple shift, and I mean, there's so many more in the Flow to Force guide, but that simple shift, the change in language, that allows you to move from force to flow, which then gives you permission to rest when needed and work with more ease and impact when your energy is high. Yeah, it's so simple. It's just about allowing yourself the freedom to step into what's naturally aligned for you rather than pushing up against something that you think you should be. Stop squeezing your round peg into a square hole, okay? If you want this framework to help you build your life in a way that feels so natural and expansive, please download the Flow Over Force Guide. This is a step-by-step approach to creating more energy, ease, and sustainable productivity. I cannot wait for you to have that guide in your hands. There's a link, download it. You'll get a PDF. It's 20 pages and it takes you through steps 1 through 5. And it also has a little checklist for you that you can use. You can print it out. You've got a little place for reflections. And of course, if you've got any questions, you will then have my email address where you can reply, and I'd be so happy to send some information your way. All right, my friends, I'm so glad that you have stuck this out with me. This took a little bit longer than expected, but my intention with this was just to help you find your natural rhythm and set you on a path so that you're moving through life with more ease and flow. And in the hope that you take me up on this challenge, you will find yourself so much happier, so much more productive, and so much more aligned with where you're going. Thanks so much for being here. Mwah. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.